I'm Tony DePasqua, and I serve as the Director of Constituent Engagement here at Gannon, and I'm excited that we can share this experience with you, providing a glimpse of an exciting venture happening right here on our campus in Erie. Our event tonight is being recorded, and tonight you have the opportunity to interact with two members of the Gannon family who have worked tirelessly to keep our community safe. We invite you to submit questions that you may have for Austin and Dr. Morrow in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can this evening. I know that Dr. Morrow and Austin are excited to share their experience with you, and they're excited to engage with you this evening. I would now like to introduce Barbara Beuscher, our Vice President for University Advancement.
Thank you, Tony, and welcome, Gannon friends. I'm here just outside of the COVID testing lab here in the CERN Science Center. CERN opened in 1970, and while it may look the same on the outside, it's constantly evolving on the inside to meet the needs of our students. You may remember having class or labs in CERN. Many of the engineering classrooms are still here, in addition to our biology and chemistry labs. You may recall that last spring, members of our engineering faculty and staff made 3D plastic face shields for area medical facilities. All of that happened right here in CERN. So tonight we have invited our Circles members, the philanthropic leaders of Gannon, to join us for a behind the scenes tour of our COVID testing. Your support helps to create transformational experiences that inspire our students to positively impact our communities. You make these experiences, just like what you'll see tonight, possible. Thank you for your support of Gannon and our students. At this time, it's my privilege to introduce your Gannon University President, Dr. Keith Taylor, and he'll start us out on the tour.
Well, hello there. It is good to see everybody. Thank you all for joining us here on campus, sort of on campus. This is, Tony has got the behind the scenes, and you got the live reporter out on the scene there. So it's a good night. So thank you all. I saw the names of who was coming tonight and the list of the famous. So it was good to see your names, and now it's good to see your faces. So thank you all for your continued support. You have been with us through the thick and thin, and in times of celebration and in times of sorrow. And I do want to start today or tonight just with a brief moment. You may be aware that we experienced the tragic death of a student this week, and the community is finding our way, has come together as the Gannon family does in supporting each other and working through what has been a very difficult week. And I think we all know that have gone through similar losses, that this is the first week of what will be many in us working through all this. So if we could just take a moment of silence in honor of Jacob Herod, I would appreciate that tonight, in memory of his time with us as a student, his time with us on this earth. So if we could just take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. So we've had a tough week. This has been an interesting 14 months for all of us, with COVID and life-changing events of pandemic and all that's been happening. But we continue to move on. And the discussion tonight and the presentation tonight about this laboratory and the work that's being done here really came out of the desire to keep our students and staff safe and keep them all here on campus. So we have a whole lot of faculty and staff and students that are creative and smart people. And Gannon is truly blessed by having a team that has just an incredible spectrum of skills And those came to the fore in trying to address a challenge, and nothing better than somebody putting those of us that are pretty competitive in a spot of challenge, and we have stepped forward. The testing that has been provided and you're going to hear about, I think has been unique across the country. There are very few institutions that have had testing at the level that Gannon has, and has been able to do it on campus when many in our community were looking for places to be tested, waiting for days and days to get the results. Our incredible students and staff have been able to not only put a lab together and make the services available, but have the results back in just a matter of hours. This has really allowed us to monitor cases on campus and throughout our community through a surveillance program that has been just phenomenal. The lab has kept us, among other things, has really been a key piece that has kept us in person all through the fall and is all through the spring, where we belong in community, where we do our best work in educating students, transforming the lives of our students, and being transformed in that process. We have not only Dr. Morrow, who I'm going to introduce in a minute here, but we have Austin Hertel with us, that we could have just tried to put a lab together. We could have just farmed out the work elsewhere, but we want to make sure that we take advantage, every advantage of trying to educate our students and having the work that we do not only serve the functionality that it needs to, but serve the students and allow the students to learn in that process. And so again, Austin's here. By the way, I'm going to give, maybe you're already going to give a shout out about the wrestling prowess of Austin. I'll let Dr. Morrow mention that, but it is good to be with you all here. So I will get out of the way and let the people that actually know what they're talking about talk. And Dr. Morrow certainly is that. He came to Gannon as the Dean of the Morosky College of Health Professions and Sciences, served as the Vice President for Academic Administration, and is now the Vice President for Strategy and Campus Services. Yeah, he does all that stuff, but for 20 years prior to that, he's got a background in molecular biology, studying pathogenic viruses. So as a coincidence, we happen to have somebody that knows all this stuff and could put this lab together. So the lab gave him an opportunity to step back into his previous roles. And around here, when we say, what an opportunity, that really translates to take on 6 more jobs and 30 more hours a week of work, and the privilege and the opportunity. But we are privileged to have Dr. Morrow here as part of our team and here tonight to explain the great work that's being done. So Dr. Morrow, thank you for all the work that you've done in getting us to this spot. And thanks for being here to tell us all about it. It's all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I really appreciate the introduction. And, you know, I have to tell you, God has been good to me. People always say, boy, you know, they must be lucky to have you, but I have been incredibly lucky to have Gannon for the past 8 years. It has been an incredible journey, you know, as Dr. Taylor had said, in several different positions. And we continue to serve, you know, in whatever kind of position we need to, you know, to make sure that we can educate our students, like Dr. Taylor said, to keep our students together in community, and to keep them interacting with the faculty and staff so that they can make a difference in their lives. And that's really what it's about at the end of the day. I'm going to tell you the story about how it is that we got there, you know, to be able to operate our own COVID testing lab. But, you know, the answer to the question of, well, why did we do it? It's because, you know, we were called to do it, and we had the time and the talent to do it. And so, you know, we felt compelled to be able to go down this road to develop our own testing lab to make sure that we could optimally serve our students. So I really am grateful to Dr. Taylor and Barbara and the whole advancement team for giving us the opportunity to speak with you for a few minutes today and tell that story. And I'm going to try to be brief because I really want you to hear from Austin. As I've said, it's really about the students. This is why we do it. And I think he just has a phenomenal story to tell. But as way of background, let me talk a little bit about, where we were at. Boy, it's crazy, but it was just a year ago. Dr. Taylor, Barbara, doesn't it feel like a little bit longer than that? Feels a little bit longer than a year, but boy, last year at this time, we were sending all of our students home. Exactly what we didn't want to do. But we knew, that what at that time it was necessary based on where the state was at and what they were requiring. But we didn't stop educating them. We overnight, and I have to give Dr. Iwanenko incredible credit for this, Dr. Walter Iwanenko, who seemingly overnight developed a whole curriculum to continue to educate students online. And that's what we did for last spring semester. We continued education, we graduated students, we continued progress for students towards their next semester. But we knew we had to have our eyes on the prize of bringing them back to Gannon. We know that's where the magic happens. We know that's where faculty and staff really interact with students in a way that are going to transform their lives. And so while we were teaching students online in last spring semester, just a year ago, we were already forming plans about how it is that we were going to bring them back for the fall semester. And I have to tell you, it has been an incredible team effort. We've put so many systems in place overnight, from our health staff, who does the COVID swabbing of our students and provides a slew of different health services to them, to our professional staff who set up temperature check stations, who designed a Live Safe app where students and faculty and staff can report their conditions and symptoms, to our classroom redesign, where we've actually changed overnight all of our classes to provide 6 feet of distancing, so that 80% of our classes can actually be offered still in class, in person, as the way that we normally do. That has been a tremendous effort by a tremendous team. And I feel just incredibly grateful to be one part of that, which is the COVID testing part. We knew that that was going to be an important element, in providing a safe environment for our students when we did bring them back. If we could understand and predict and find if students or faculty and staff were positive for COVID, and be able to isolate them and then provide them with continuing education and then quarantine those who were impacted, we knew that we were going to keep the rest of our community safe. So we always had the idea that we needed to test for the presence of COVID in our Gannon population. We just didn't immediately know how to do it. And so we were thinking about that over the summer. And as it turns out, the whole idea to pursue that ourselves came about as I was going on a run with Val Basic, who is our CFO here at Gannon. We're very much into health and wellness, I think, as many of you know. And so we sometimes have meetings where we're running or walking. It's just a great way to share ideas. And as sometimes good ideas come out, it just happened to be, during a run for the two of us. And we were kind of going back and forth and talking about how is it, that we're going to be able to engage in a testing program at Gannon. At the time when we were looking at different places that offered that as a service, they were really expensive, over $100 a test. And that could be prohibitively expensive when you want to test the numbers that we knew we were going to have to test to keep our whole population safe. And not only that, it wasn't very timely in terms of when you would get results back. 2-3 days it started with, and it trickled into 5, 6, 7 days. And that just wasn't allowing us to get timely information. And so as we were talking through that, I had said to Val, I said, I read the CDC emergency use authorization for what this protocol is, and I think we can do it. I said, we have the lab space, we have the machines and equipment, and we have the personnel who could validate these experiments. As Dr. Taylor had mentioned, prior to my positions again, and I had served for over a decade as a faculty, and the research that I'd done was around microbial pathogens in the environment, as it turns out. And so while I wasn't testing for COVID, I was testing for other pathogenic microbes in the water and the air and the soil. And so I was familiar, with the process and the techniques. And so I said, let me give it a shot. So we only had 2 months. And so as we sometimes work here at Gannon, we know what has to be done. We put our heads down and we find a way to do it. And so with just 2 months of development, the goal was to develop a COVID testing lab. It involved many hours in the lab. When you go through this, you have to go through a process where you can do proof of principle, right? Where you need to make sure that the test could work. We were using a PCR-based test. And so for those of you who might be familiar with science, it's considered moderate complexity. So it's not an easy test. But you have to go through a series of steps and controls just to make sure that the stuff that you're doing is giving results that you would predict is going to be given in a general population. And so we went through that process, good science, and then we had to validate it. We had to actually test it, on individuals using positive and negative controls. And just a phenomenal side story, I have to tell you, President's leadership team were the first to sign up to be the guinea pigs for the validation testing. Every single one of them said, yes, I would love to get a swab up my nose and as many times as you need to make sure that you could validate the study. So I think that's a tremendous little anecdote that I wanted to share in terms of our leadership. We all serve in many ways, and to be a guinea pig in COVID testing just happened to be one of them during that time this past summer. But we did. We ended up validating the study, and at the time as we were going through this, all of the things that we do, we want to make sure that we involve students. And, we didn't have a professional staff, to do this. We all had our regular jobs, and our jobs were pretty busy at the moment doing COVID testing. And so as fate would have it, Austin at the time was looking for an experience like this. And he was referenced very highly by MJ Taylor, who is Dr. Taylor's wife, and who is a public health professional, as it turns out. So when she gives a strong recommendation, you take it very seriously. And so I talked with Austin, realized that, this individual has tremendous potential. He's going to get a lot out of this experience. As a dual public health and biology major. As Dr. Taylor said, he's also a wrestling champion. So he won our regional championship here this past year in his weight class and went to nationals and did a phenomenal job there as well. So just tremendous achievement all the way around from this young student, which has been phenomenal just to get to know him as a person. But then also to be able to work with him, to show him what it's like, to do research in a lab, to be able to figure out, and interpret results, and to be able to do something really important, right? I mean, it was providing a tremendous service to our students, faculty, and staff, our whole community. I mean, he's been instrumental, as it turns out, in doing the types of things that is continues to keep our community together during these times. And he's going to tell you his story, but, since that time, we've been able to scale up now, and we've now been able to test over 20,000 tests here at Gannon, which is an amazing number. We've also extended our testing into the community, and we've run over 5,000 tests for community partners. So it's not only been a great way that we've been able to serve Gannon, but also serve the rest of the community and generate some revenue while we're doing that. To my knowledge, I think that we are the highest volume tester in all of Erie County for COVID. I don't think there's anybody that's higher than us at the moment. So we now have engaged 2 other undergraduate students who are getting a phenomenal research experience. And we have a lab technician as well, who's doing the volume. And Austin has moved on to continue to test for COVID, but also to take this to the next level in terms of research and being able to communicate that out, to the scientific community and the general community. And he's going to tell that story. But before he does, and before I officially introduce him to you, just to kind of set the stage for the type of individual that you're going to be talking to tonight, I have to tell you my own little anecdote about Austin. It came at a time when we were gearing up for the fall semester, and we had just gotten the validation completed. So we knew we were ready to test. We were welcoming back our students for the fall semester. And we decided that we wanted to test every single freshman that came into the dorms. And so that was quite a task. At the time, we had not innovated in a way where we could handle as much volume as we can now. So we were really working hard to make sure that we could complete that task. It involved an incredible amount of work. And so the one weekend where we really had mass testing, him and I came in around noon, and it was a Saturday. And, I had just kind of said, Austin, we'll start around noon and just work as long as you want. And, I was kind of working under the premise that he would put in a normal day and then he would go home like a normal individual. And that I would just, finish the testing, whatever needed to be done. Well, noon turned into 5 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock at night turned into 8 o'clock at night. And then 8 o'clock at night turned into 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, geez, he is really hanging tough. And then 11 o'clock turned into 1 o'clock in the morning. And then 1 o'clock turned into 3 in the morning. And I went, oh my goodness, I might kill an undergrad. Like, I don't think he's going to go home. And so, at that point, I had to force him home because he was ready to continue to work, to do the job, to finish the job and to do it right. And I think that just speaks volumes to his character, to his dedication, to his work ethic, and his ability to really want to truly make a difference, here at Gannon. So, this is the type of person that you're going to hear from. This is the type of student, that we are lucky enough to have here at Gannon. My pleasure to introduce to you all Austin Hertel, who's going to tell you a little bit about his story and his experience in the lab.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Well, first off, I'd like to say that Dr. Morrow and Dr. Taylor are bragging quite a bit. So I'm a little embarrassed, but I'm truly humbled by this experience. This has been incredible. And thank you guys for having me on here to talk about an experience that's been truly life-changing for me. This is really amazing stuff. And thinking back to my freshman years, I'm sure you guys can all imagine back to, searching for colleges and not really sure where I was going to be in life. This is really indicative that I made the right choice. So again, thank you. We have an amazing Gannon family here. So as Dr. Morrow and Dr. Taylor said, my name's Austin Hertel, and I'm originally from Rochester, New York. I major in biology and now more recently public health. And so I got involved in quite a long and interesting story that I'm excited to share with you guys about how I got involved in this crazy world of COVID testing and the pandemic that we currently find ourselves in. So where my story really began was back in March of last year. It's crazy, it's been a whole year now. When the pandemic hit and we unfortunately had to send students home, it was an absolute nightmare for a couple weeks there. And honestly, a tremendous effort by all of our staff. I can think back, and I wasn't sure what was going on behind the scenes yet with the administration and our leadership team. But I can just tell you, as far as the faculty goes, they were doing incredible work and scrambling to really, make classes happen within 2 weeks. I didn't think that was possible. It was possible. So with the right people in place, anything's possible here. So really awesome work there. But moving forward, when the pandemic hit, I decided to stay in Erie. Going home and doing schoolwork wasn't quite what I wanted to do. I wanted to remain focused here, and it was just the best option for me. So I stayed on campus, and I was staying in Erie at the time. But, I'd always had an intrinsic interest for infectious disease, believe it or not. When I came to Gannon, I was actually looking into epidemiology programs. And if you guys don't know what that is, that's public health surveillance type work. And that was my primary interest at first when I was searching for schools. So I decided to go into biology, mainly because I had the interest in hard research, being able to find out the whys of the world and explore it in a deeper level. So, and I thought that a biology major and being able to research would be able to give me the answers to the questions that I wanted. And they definitely have. So when that started, I started reaching out to people and, mostly faculty here and asking questions. And I will shout out Dr. Vanderlyn here. He is one of our microbiology professors, and he's fantastic. Him and I were having some correspondence over email, and he had taught a microbiology class to me. And so I was asking him questions about, how the virus works and just trying to get more information. And he was putting some really good research or resources for me to look into. And so I started asking questions. At the time, I was also communicating with the Department of Health. Before the pandemic hit, I was looking to get an internship opportunity there that I'll talk about in a minute. So I was still really interested, and I wanted to help out in the community. It just felt like this was my calling, and I hadn't really found it yet here, because I was just a sophomore at the time, going through research, and everything happened the way it did, and kind of floored everybody. So life came to a halt for a minute. So I got in touch with the right people, and one of those people was Dr. MJ Taylor, and she has been an amazing mentor for me. And our story of becoming connected is a pretty interesting one as well. So it started my sophomore year, so about 2 years ago now. I was walking around Zurn, and if you guys remember back to walking around Zurn quite a bit, you'll see posters everywhere. So there's all kinds of posters up, and some people take the time to read them, some don't, and most of the time, I'll admit, I didn't either. But there was one that caught my eye, and it was one for a new program that she happened to help develop, and it was our public health program here. And the course title was epidemiology, and there's a few others, and it really caught my attention because that was what I originally was interested in, and now I had the opportunity. So I had a few other credits to move around, and I made it work and was able to take the class just out of interest. I said, I see how this goes. And she pushed me to my limits every day in that class. She really challenged me in an amazing way. Always asked me tough questions, tried to get more out of me, and I loved it. It really was a challenging but really great course. And so that's a testament to her. And I remember one day in class, I was sitting there and I had just answered a question, and she actually whispered to me, she said, you should think about a career in public health. And I had never really thought about what I wanted to do career-wise yet. So, I held that in high regard. So her and I started talking about what could the next steps be for me. So she had connections in the Department of Health. And so she decided to get me connected with some of the epidemiologists there. And I was really excited and looking forward to a research opportunity with them and being able to help out the community with some of our health needs. So when the pandemic hit, unfortunately, I was unable to pursue an internship with them. They were obviously really overloaded and busy, and not for their lack of interest. But what they did point me in the direction of was the Regional Medical Reserve Corps. And for you guys that don't know, that's a volunteer group that pulls in professionals and civilians of all kinds to come in and help in times of disaster or need. And this definitely was one. So I started volunteering. I went to a few pop-up COVID testing sites, which were some of the first in Erie. And I just registered people, helped them get COVID tested. And, at the time, thinking back, there was almost nothing going on for COVID testing. It was pretty frightening. I was also packaging PPE to be delivered to businesses and institutions like this. And so that was a really cool experience, and I'm thankful for it. But around that time, I was also looking to do more. I wanted to do research. I was really still looking for a more involved experience. And MJ reached out again, and we kind of touched base. She asked me how things were going, and she put me in touch with Dr. Morrow. And she told me that we were thinking about setting up a COVID testing lab here, and that I might have an opportunity to help out with it. And, I'm not going to lie, I lit right up inside. As soon as I read the email, I didn't really believe it at first. I was excited, and I was like, there's no way that this is going to happen, that I could be a part of this. So she got me in touch with Dr. Morrow, and, so we started having conversations, and he invited me out to meet him at the lab one day. So that was about a week after I had first got my first email from him. A week after, and I was like, if I'm doing anything, it's probably going to be months later. I'm not going to get involved right away. He had me there in a week, and that was really cool. I was excited but nervous, super nervous on my first day to come in and learn the ropes around the lab. I was familiar with lab work as far as my coursework has gone, but not to the extent that I would find myself in soon. And I really wanted to make a difference and impress. So I will say this about Dr. Morrow. He's been an incredible mentor and teacher throughout this entire process. I went from totally being unconfident in the lab, just, a regular student that has, gone in and done lab work and had baseline familiarity with some of the lab techniques that I would be doing, to almost autonomous. And by autonomous, I mean, I've been able to have a much more integrated interaction with some of our faculty members here. I speak to them quite a bit and interact with them in a very professional way that I wouldn't have gotten with just a student relationship. It's become more of what I would expect to see in graduate school or in my professional career, and that's been really awesome, being able to interact with them in that way and gain experience and learn more about them and their insights. And they're really interested in helping me along my path as well. The other thing is that it really made me realize that I want to pursue more after this. As far as my education, I want to pursue a PhD program, and Dr. Morrow has been really helping me out with that and putting together what I need to in order to take this to the next level. And I really found my calling and my passion here. So that's that. If there's a testament to this experience, that's one of them. On top of becoming autonomous, I was also able, as Dr. Morrow had mentioned, transition into more of a research leader position. I still do occasional COVID testing, but like you said, we hired a lab tech as we started to expand. And my role transitioned into turning our results and a lot of the hard work that we put in into something that we could show the community and really deliver to the scientific community. So what that's looked like for me is I've got 2 other students involved, the 2 that we've hired to help out in the testing lab. And so I'm able to also interact with other students and lead them. I can tell you that I've showed, after becoming autonomous to a degree, being able to show molecular techniques in the laboratory to other students and getting teaching experience at the same time and getting them excited about science. One of them is a pretty close friend of mine, and she was looking for a research opportunity. And I said, hey, you should check this out. And I think you'll really get an experience you didn't know was coming. So that was really cool to be able to transition to that leadership role. And, I've been familiar with leadership, on the wrestling mat. As they had mentioned, I'm an athlete, but this is something entirely different. Being able to teach students and it help them grow and realize their passion just like I did has been awesome, and giving back to the people that have really made a difference to me. So with that, some of the results that we have to show for that in becoming more of a professional approach and getting ready to move on into a PhD position. Currently, right now, we have 4 abstracts submitted to conferences that we'll be talking at in the next couple months up until June. And on top of that, we're also working on a comprehensive publication to be submitted to scientific journals. And on top of that, like I had mentioned, we're leading 2 other students, and they will also ultimately be co-authors on that publication as well. So that will be really awesome as they progress into their future careers. So with that said, I really want to touch on the 2 major impacts that I think this has had on me as a student. And one of those is mentorship. So if you guys can remember back to your days at Gannon, we're not a big institution. And that's why I came here. I wanted personal interactions with professors, with faculty, and that was something that was important to me. I wanted to establish relationships. And I wasn't quite sure how. I was a little intimidated at first, but they really do a great job at reaching out here. You can't really escape a personal experience. And at the end of the day, that's exactly what I was looking for. So, like I said, I had been reaching out to people that touched my life in a way that, I'll never forget. I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. MJ Taylor for really putting me on this path, and Dr. Morrow. And one of the biggest things is that they've taught me to start believing in myself as much as they believed in me. And as corny as that sounds, it's really important. Believe me, it's really important when you're doing stuff that you're not confident with. Like I said, confidence in the lab wasn't necessarily something that I was familiar with. But seriously, you start to believe in yourself and thinking that you can almost accomplish anything. I had no idea that I would be even close to approaching a PhD program. I was a 1st-generation college student. Nobody in my family attended college. Nobody, half of them graduated high school. So for me to be looking for a PhD program has been inspiring to not only me, but my family as well. And I have these people to thank for it. And, it's not just a matter of developing as a student every day, but every day they're impacting my life and, helping me to become a better leader, yet a better human. And that's been really the crux of this whole experience. And eventually, and like I said, I was able to give that experience back to some of my peers in a way that I didn't think I'd be able to before. I was familiar with it in athletics. I was able to, I've always loved teaching wrestling. I've always taught camps of kids and stuff like that. But this is something different where it's really my peer groups that I've been able to inspire and be an advocate of public health for in a time where it's really needed and we need good voices. So I'm really thankful for that. The other really credible experience that I've gotten out of this is, again, like I touched on, was leadership. I had mentioned that I'm a wrestler here, and that has been an awesome experience in teaching me how to be a leader. But again, this is something entirely different. Like I said, I've been able to advocate for public health, engage other students, and it really gives me the chance to give back to the community, give back to Gannon, and I'm really thankful for that opportunity. I love teaching people, and maybe one day I'll end up a professor. That's not off the books, and so I really do love giving back, and I really thank you guys for having me here today. This has been awesome. So thank you for the experience. I'm really thankful that you guys all got together to listen to my story. I'm very humbled. We have an amazing family here, and there's not enough words I could say. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Austin. As we mentioned before, if you have questions, we will open it up in a minute for Q&A, and you also can put that in the chat. So we'll start out with our first question for Austin. One of the things that I really like to ask our friends and alumni of Gannon is, what is your Gannon story? So you just shared with us that you're a first generation college student. I'd love to hear your journey and how you chose Gannon and how it built up to this moment. And
Yeah,
we'll
for
ask
sure. I'd
that
love
while
to.
everyone else is thinking of their questions. So
What was that? I think your mic cut out for a second, that last part.
Oh, sorry. I said we'll let you answer that, and we'll let everyone else think of all their questions they have. So
Yeah, for sure. So when I first started looking at schools, Gannon was not, and I'll admit, was not on my radar. I actually had never heard of the place. And it really started with pursuing a wrestling career. And like I had said, there was nobody in my family that had attended college. Quite honestly, nobody really had the money to send me away to college. And so I really had to make that on my own, wrestling. So that's why wrestling was really an important part of my experience. And when I was looking to go to school, it was really based around recruitment for that. But the other thing, not just being an athlete, I was really interested in evolving my academic career. I was always interested in science. I was very interested in the classroom experience, and I wanted a place where I could have close interaction with faculty and mentors that I didn't have in my life at the time. So I didn't necessarily know how much I needed it, but I found that out shortly after. But that's really what I was looking for at the time. So when Gannon reached out to me, some of our wrestling coaches here, I started looking into some of their programs, and I noticed that they had a really robust medical and public health, not necessarily public health yet, but biology and science and health science programs. And that's exactly what I wanted. So that was great. And that's our bread and butter here. And it's pretty awesome. So that got me excited right away. As soon as I saw that, I told my dad I wanted to visit, and I wanted to see what the wrestling program was all about. I wanted to see, what campus was like. And I had been on a few other visits that I had liked and disliked. And I was really just exploring everything. This was totally new to me and my family. It was a really cool bonding experience with my dad to be able to go around campuses and talk to coaches. And so I will say our wrestling staff here is phenomenal, as much as our athletic staff. So I got to tour the wrestling room, see that got me really excited. We have an amazing facility here. So it is an incredible room, a better room than most Division I programs have. So that's really cool. We have an awesome coach. So I was drawn right away from that. But I always tell this story to students, and I'll say this: I've had a couple of recruits that were freshmen that I had come stay with me when I was a freshman wrestler. All 4 of them committed, and 2 happen to be All-Americans right now. So, and this is what I was telling. Yeah, and one was our national finalist this year, Alex Farinchuk. He's a very good friend of mine now. But what I was telling them when they were doing their school search was that when you come here, and this was really advice I would give to anybody. When you're looking for a place that you really want to find special, it hits you right away. When I arrived at Gannon, I remember the first day, I think it was the same week that everybody, the freshmen were moving in, and it was Celebrate Erie. And as soon as I came, there's concerts and live music going down down the street. There's banners everywhere. There's people moving in. It was gorgeous out, and it really just rocked my world. I was like, this is, in my head of what college was like and what I wanted out of an experience. That's what it was in my head. And that's what I saw when I came here. It was cool seeing the city sprawl, the gorgeous buildings that we have, like Old Main. So that was really cool. And on top of it, it just felt like a community. People were walking by, smiling, saying hi. Any staff or faculty I had met, same thing. And when we say it's a Gannon family, it truly is. So I was instantly drawn in that way, and that's what I was telling people when I was recruiting them for wrestling. I said, I'll be honest with you, if you don't come here and don't feel that sense of community, I'm not gonna even bother with another spiel about what the wrestling program can do to you. But I think talking to most of them, they felt it. It was very close. It was close-knit groups here, and we have an amazing culture on just our team. But I think that's true to be said of any of the programs here. I can just speak to it for my wrestling team. It's an incredible culture, but I've experienced that culture in many other groups. So,
Right. Well,
that's how I. Sorry,
Good. Well, thank you,
taking
Austin.
too long on this question. But
Yeah.
no, this was really an important part. And so, immediately after I left Gannon, and I left with my dad, and we had traveled to Division I schools at the time and Division II schools for wrestling. And like I said, that was the majority of what I was interested in looking at. I talked about what Gannon could offer me as far as Division II experience, being able to really focus on my athletic career in a competitive manner and my academic career. And that's what I wanted. As soon as I left Gannon, I remember getting in the car with my dad and saying, yeah, that's it. And I came back and I did an overnight visit and I stayed with our team and, got even closer with them. And it just slid. I committed 2 weeks later. Right. And I was taking forever. There was no place that made me feel like that. So that's kind of my story about arriving at Gannon for the first time. So that was really exciting.
Good. Well, thank you for joining in. Gannon truly is a family, and I know that I see some alums smiling and reminiscing in their days, and that's similar to what they experienced during their time here. So thanks for sharing that. I know that we have several folks that joined tonight that are just eager to learn the nitty gritty of what goes on behind the scenes now, because everything has to be, sanitary and protected in those things. I know you can't actually do the test, but I know Dr. Morrow is prepared to kind of walk us through and show us the machines they use and those type of things. So we're really eager to kind of see the mechanics behind it. And then we have a few more questions about the testing as well. So I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Morrow.
Steve, we're not hearing you.
Right.
Yep, Steve, we're not able to hear you.
All right, let's see. Can you
There
hear me
you
now?
go. Now we can
Yes.
hear you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
great. Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we do the test. And, but before I do that, I saw a couple questions that I think I can answer in the chat. But again, another quick anecdote here. When Austin interviewed, we had chatted, after about a few days after he had emailed, and then I offered him the job on the spot. And then I asked if he could work tomorrow. And he said yes. And so he really dove right in and has been making a difference ever since. And I'll walk you through what that procedure is that he did on day one after his interview, starting the very next day. It is a PCR-based test, and there was the questions about the frequency and how long does it take to get results and how do we do the community testing. We are actually really rapid, and we have innovated in the lab and validated those innovations to actually get faster than when we first started. So when we first started in the lab, what we did was, and I'll show you kind of what the lab looks like now, because we've started to expand our efforts and we have plans, to continue on with this. We know that the world's going to be changing moving into the future. We know that testing for both microbes and chemicals is just going to be a prominent thing that the world is going to have to get used to. So we've kind of geared up the lab to be rapid testing now. and to be able to test a number of different things. And I'll give you a little tour of the lab in just a second of where we're at and where we're going. But in the meantime, when we had first started, and Austin was day one in the lab, we went through a process of isolating the RNA. So COVID is a virus, and it's an RNA virus. And so we use a PCR based test. And so what that does is it takes the RNA, which is the genetic material of the virus, and it just amplifies it over and over and over again. And it gets enough where you can actually detect a signal. And you have a special piece of equipment called a qPCR machine that will allow you to detect that. And you actually detect fluorescence based on a little spot in the virus that is targeted. And so if it has that little spot, it's targeted and things light up in the machine. And then that machine measures the fluorescence. And so it's really a two-step process where you isolate the RNA, and they have lots of different kits that you can do that. But again, we were using this as a teaching opportunity for students. So we used the kits, but through that, we taught them every single step, and this is what you do, and this is why you do it, so that they know how to become good scientists and they know how to troubleshoot if things don't always work out right. And sometimes things don't work out right. And so we did that. We isolated the RNA, and you use kits for that at lab benches. And we do all of our work within a biosafety cabinet, level 2, that's equipped to handle BSL-2 reagents. So I think it's noteworthy. A question that I sometimes get is, well, isn't this dangerous? And, I tell people, not if you do it right. And so, if you are training people the right way and educating them and supervising them in the right way, it's as safe as could be. And we do all of our work under a biosafety cabinet to make sure that we don't spread any contaminants anywhere. So it's a perfectly safe, a safe test that we run. And I'll show you what that cabinet looks like. But what we do is after we isolate the little genetic material, we put it into the PCR machine, and then that amplifies the signal, because there's not a lot of virus in some people who are in the early stages of infection. It might only be 100 virions, and that's very difficult to detect. You can't really detect it with your eyes. You can't detect it even by just isolating the number of viruses and putting something on it that will amplify the signal. You actually have to replicate at least a part of the virus, and that's what we do, and that's what the PCR machine does, and then you see the fluorescence. We do have a PCR machine. We've since bought another one so that we could scale up on the testing that we've done. And I can show you, we actually, that machine happens to be in the lab downstairs, but I'll show you kind of what one might look like as well, as I kind of give you the little virtual tour in just a second. But that's the assay. But what we did was kind of realizing that that was lengthy, and it actually wasn't too lengthy. We still had, it took us about 6 hours to go through the whole process to do 27 samples. We actually went through a process where we innovated and we found ways that we could speed that process up. So now we do a rapid boil to break open the cells and to isolate the RNA. And we can complete the whole assay for 92 samples in 4 hours. So we actually guarantee all of our results will be done in 24 hours or less. And it typically takes us about 6 hours to get results back. So we have never broken from that. We have always delivered results both to our Gannon family and our outside community in less than 24 hours. And we keep prices very low. For our external community, we charge $25 a sample, which again is much lower than what you would see in other laboratories and places. Again, because we're offering a service. And so that's kind of and we're able to now test really high amounts of volumes now. And so we typically run about anywhere from 250 up to 600 samples a day. We have run, this semester, I think it's over 10,000 tests at this point. So we have really scaled up now. Like Austin had said, in addition to him and myself, who's overseeing the lab, we also have a lab technician and 2 undergraduate students. But that's kind of speaks to our level of efficiency in being able to do this. It's not like a full-blown staff. We want to make sure our students get the education and the experience and develop the responsibility, for doing this under the right supervision. And so we're always trying to find students to contribute to the process, and we've been incredibly lucky to do that. I'm going to take a second and kind of walk you around the lab here, so bear with me. if you have vertigo, we're going to try to do it slowly. But we have plans for the future. And so we know we've started with COVID testing. We're going to continue the COVID testing. But we are now positioned very well for starting to develop other assays for other types of microbes and pathogens, and also chemicals as well. We were lucky enough to get some fancy chemistry testing equipment to be able to test for chemicals that might be out there in the environment. And so recently we have actually established our own testing lab here, and we're in the process of finishing setting it up, and we have enough to get going right now. But again, we have plans to really scale that up to seek CLIA certification, which is a nationally recognized certification where we can actually use these tests for diagnostic purposes. And that's going to really open us wide up. So we're exploring ways to get that done now. You know, the future's looking, I would say, really bright for how it is that we've positioned ourselves for that level of movement forward. This is what our lab looks like. If I kind of give you a 360, and you're going to see Austin in the background at some point, right there. But it's not, you know, a large space, but we don't need a large space to get the job done. Typically what you need in a molecular testing lab like this is you need some place where you have a freezer or a fridge. And so you'll see that in the background where we keep all of our reagents that's needed for the testing. That's the PCR testing. You need lab benches. And so I was at one, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. You need a fume hood, and this is our biosafety cabinet right here. This is where we'll take anything that would be a live sample. And so that would be something that would be generated from a swab. All of our tests are from nasal swabs, and it's all from our phenomenal our health staff at our testing center. And so, so that's how we get our samples. We process them there, and then once they become inactive, we'll be able to go back to the bench and finish preparing them. And here's just an example of what the lab bench looks like. We'll finish preparing them, and then we'll put them into our PCR machine. And while we don't have the PCR machine here, it's actually something that looks very much like that little block that's right over my right-hand shoulder there. And all it does is give you a fluorescence signal, and then we're able to quantitate that. So we'll know not only whether you're positive or not, we'll also know the number of virions that you have in that sample. And interestingly enough, you can have as little as 1,000 virions, and the record holder had over 10 million viral particles in their nasal swab. No, it wasn't you, Dr. Taylor, don't worry. You're safe. You're not the record holder here.
Can I just jump in really quickly? Sorry, I'm Brad Collins. I'm a 1999 graduate. I, with my wife Tiffany, we got married at Mary Seat of Wisdom Chapel. But I really want to be clear about what you are talking about, because I think that we, as the lay public, and I deal with COVID every day in the hospital as internal medicine hospitalist, but we hear about the rapid test and we hear about the sort of the big test. And I think that it's really important for people to know that you are doing like the good test in a rapid amount of time. So the antigen test is what they do in 15 minutes, where they swab not deep, but swab very shallow in your nose, and they can get a test in 15 minutes. And those results are really variable, and there's a lot of false reports on that. That is not what we're doing here. And I think that, so even in places across the country, people who get the PCR test still wait 2 to 3 days to get this result. And you guys are able to produce that within 24 hours. And it is a huge testament to Gannon and what you guys have been able to do, and you, Dr. Morrow, for having the expertise to be able to bring this in Austin, your willingness to do what you for that. But I think I really think it's important to understand, because when I know that when you live it, it sort of like sounds like, oh, I'm just going to say what, you know, that's my life. And so we do the PCR test, and that's what it is. This is the gold standard test in 6 hours. That medically is mind blowing. That doesn't happen in hospitals sometimes. And so I just I couldn't put that in the chat. I had to underscore it because it's really, really amazing. And I really, really appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Really
Thanks, Brad.
appreciate that.
Thanks,
And
Brad.
the funny thing is, when we were doing this, and of course we validated it, right? And we actually have hospitals who come to us now because they need something very accurate, very sensitive, and quick, right? And so they partnered with us in many instances. But as we were going through this, it's the most accurate, the most sensitive, and it really is the gold standard. It's what CDC recommends and approved from day one. And there have been a lot of other tests that have been developed, and we have the capabilities of doing those tests, and we've decided not to. We said, no, you know what, this is the way that we need to continue doing it, even though there's other stuff that are on the market that are even probably cheaper at this point, but they're not what's going to keep our community safe. And so we've stayed with what we know works. And through that process, since we've been as reliable as we have been, we've actually generated a number of clients, based on that success story. And we, as we validated it, we go through CLIA certified labs to validate, and with thousands of samples, we have been 100% accurate, except for one single instance where we had a discrepancy between us and the validated lab. And someone said, well, it looked like you were wrong here. And I said, well, maybe they're wrong. But it's very accurate. We appreciate the comments.
Good. Thanks, Steve. I know that as we just wrap up in a few minutes, one question that I would like to ask you, just because I have the opportunity to interact with you. I know that this has sparked your return to the classroom, and so could you talk a little bit about that and how that has evolved and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so it's in different ways because people learn all over the place at Gannon. And so one of them is Austin's actually taking a research class with me right now. So not only is he getting the experience, he's actually getting credits for this. And so he gets graded on his work. So his night's just beginning. But outside of that, I've given several guest lectures in various departments at this point. We've really applied COVID to our teaching, not just in the work that we've done in the lab, but in our overall experiences. So we're developing a virology course, which is very likely to be on the books coming up in this next semester, because who wouldn't want to learn more about COVID at this point and other viruses that might be emerging. And I continue to go into classes and speak about these experiences that apply to the specific classes. And you'd think it would just be science, but it's not. It's ethics, it's philosophy, it's religion. There are applications to the work we do across the curriculum, and we have incredible faculty who recognize the linkage point, and I've been fortunate to be able to get in and be invited and be able to speak a little bit. And Austin was just telling me a story today about how he was showing his lab mates, how to do some techniques related to the testing that we're doing in one of his classes. So yeah, it's I don't want to say it's infectious, but once the learning begins, it's hard to stop it.
Good. Well, thank you, Steve. And Steve, we appreciate the time you're taking tonight. I know that probably translates to you and Austin staying later in the lab tonight. So we really appreciate you taking time to chat with us. And before I pass this back to Dr. Taylor, I just want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for all of the ways that you support Gannon. This is what makes these type of things possible, particularly gifts to the Gannon Fund, which really are the area of greatest needs, and gives us the most flexibility to be able to use these funds as priorities emerge. And so certainly being able to respond to this and being able to purchase the equipment and the other things that we needed, those weren't things that were in the budget. They weren't in anyone's budget. And so having that flexibility from the Gannon Fund truly made all of this possible. And so we know that everyone on this call tonight invests in so many different ways, whether it's buildings or scholarships. And so we're truly grateful for all of the ways that you make this type of experience possible. So thank you. And Dr. Taylor, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, I can start us off and finish us off here. Well, first, I thank you for spending some time with us, and I'll reiterate Barbara's thanks for all of your support. I hope you learned something tonight. I know I learned something. One thing I learned is I knew that Austin was awesome, but talk about articulate and bright man that has got a bright future. Wow. Now, of course, you're going to make me, Austin, go home and tell my wife that, you gave her credit for all kinds of stuff, and I'm going to have to live with that for the next however many months. But it is a family, and everybody's in it together, and we're all trying to just move each other one step closer to whatever the best version of ourselves are. So thank you all for being here tonight. It's exciting time at Gannon. Even with all of the challenges, there is so much happening on campus in facility renovations, in program development, in the awesome work that students are doing. I am so proud to be part of this Gannon community, and there are such exciting things happening. We just love the opportunity to connect with you all, to share the story, to tell the story. I saw nodding heads with some of the things that were said tonight that I know that this resonates with you and your experience here at Gannon. The experience is different, obviously. For some of us, it's a few days or a few decades from when we were college students, but many of the things are still the same. The heart and soul of who Gannon is, the spirit of the faculty and staff that just love our students and love this community and are doing everything they can to try and keep us in community and to do great things going forward. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed our hour or so here together. I look forward to seeing you in person, to continuing these conversations and others, and just have a great evening and stay safe, stay healthy, and be good to each other. God bless.